everybody. Welcome to the.
Hello.
That sounded like. What is that? There was something. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Rabbit Trails podcast. This is Barrett Harkins with Garrett Regner. We are after a long hiatus, or is that a word? Yeah, no, it's not hyacinth. That's a flower. Hiatus is a break.
Break. We haven't talked in a while. We've been busy.
Yeah,
busy.
Selling apartments, packing up. It's May the 7th. And it snowed outside today.
Holy cow. It's hot here, man. I'm in short sleeves. Some other kids are already in shorts.
It looks hot. It actually, so it's interesting. There is sun coming through in your room there, and I can tell by the way that the sun is coming in, and believe it or not, the amount of traffic noise that I hear outside, that it's hot.
Yeah.
Even traffic drives differently when it's hot.
You're like a temperature whisperer. You can
That's right. I've just lived overseas long enough. I can tell, there's a certain amount of traffic that happens in a big city, or maybe it's just the fact that you have your window open. I don't know.
Yeah. Windows open. It's a nice day. We need the fresh air coming in.
Yeah. Well, so how have you been? It's been a while.
Good, just busy. I think you've been busy transitioning out of a role and moving, and you sold a house.
I just listened to a podcast on transgender stuff, and so when you said you've been transitioning, my brain went to other places. That's
like the thing now. Yeah,
just for clarity's sake, I am not transitioning.
Yeah, transitioning out of a job position in a country. We've been busy. Just a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah,
a lot of things to do. It's life's going back to normal.
Yeah,
and so that means there's just more stuff now to do. So
well. It's good to be back behind the microphone, where we belong.
Back in the saddle.
Both belong in our natural habitat. I heard an interesting. I listened to an interesting podcast the other day. Tim Keller being interviewed by Carey Nieuwhof. So Carey Nieuwhof leadership.
Yeah, he's got a good
podcast that they always say podcast with that crazy Canadian accent that I can't hit it. But anyway, and they were talking to Keller, and fantastic interview. So for anyone out there, go and find that interview with Tim Keller, worth listening. But there was a short, about midway through, a short comment. They get onto the realities of, okay, how has church and ministry changed due to pandemic and due to Zoom and digital and different things like that. And there was a fascinating conversation that then happened based on, well, what is the benefit of digital and what is the necessary of presence in ministry that I'd like to verbally process with you a little bit.
Yeah.
So Keller says, well, of course, far and above, if this pandemic had happened 10 years ago, it would have looked completely different. And thanks to technology.
Oh, that's Zoom, a great question. Yeah.
This is wow. The things that we can do because of Zoom and how life was able to continue going on with a semblance of normalcy, which I thought was a fantastic point. And he said, obviously a lot of churches will never go back to doing just location services, that they'll also stream. And even us as a small church in Sweden, we will continue to do some form of streaming.
Yeah.
We were talking about, okay, what equipment are we going to have for the long haul and all these things. So anyway, so there are those things. But Keller made a fantastic point, which I think you and I have talked about a little bit here, but I want to do a deeper dive. He talked about how presence is very necessary for ministry.
Yeah.
And so the way that he put it was, look, while digital's great and these things are great, at the end of the day, what he said is, if I'm face-to-face meeting you, you don't check your email, but we've all checked our email on Zoom meetings.
Of course. Yeah. Or done other stuff. pay bills,
and booked flights.
Booked flights. You know what?
Rebooked, canceled flights.
Planned vacations, future vacations you might take. You know, I mean, what
really the cost of moving to Spain.
Yeah, really, the sky's the limit. You know, it's just really what's at the tip of your fingertips. Well, you're sitting at a computer.
Yeah, all of those I have done. I admit.
Yeah, I've we need that. Yeah, it's basically confession time. I mean, and you know, I mean, I always sometimes in big meetings trying to look and say, you know, at people, you know, are they? How do I you know, try to see if you can catch somebody.
They just turned their camera off. Are they picking their nose, or are they doing something? Are they having a conversation? Or
yeah. Or the fact that your kids wander into the room, you know.
Yeah, like I just thought I started just owning it when my kids would walk into the room.
Yeah,
you know?
Me too. It's not
just like, hey, here they are, people. So no, I thought it was a fantastic point. So what he would say is the quality of our conversation and our interaction. So like, then there was another podcast that I was listening to where they were talking about, so one thing that happens is like you lose so much of the personal aspects of interaction. So he would say like the ability to small talk. It's like, you don't really small talk on Zoom. You say the meeting's going to start at X time and it's going to end at X time. You get on, everyone says, hi, everybody, glad you're here. Okay, let's start the meeting. And there's no opportunity for that small talk of this was the context of New York City. So it was like, hey, what train did you take on the way here? Oh, have you seen this? Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. And these shared moments that we have as humanity, I got to thinking those things are really important. And I don't think I want to be careful. I think those things are really important and we should appreciate them for what they are, that they're not a waste of time, that they actually are they enrich life.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you can go deeper, is that we are embodied people, right? We follow a God, Jesus, who actually took on human flesh and embodied humanity and walked among us. I think that's very important. And that I think in some sense what we're seeing, if I can propose something that maybe is totally wrong, but it feels that more and more our society is moving into a kind of a fascination with another word totally, but it's very old Gnosticism, very old philosophy that the early Christians dealt with, which is that our bodies, our ability to dwell in space and time, it's not important. And you see that, I think you see that in some of the kind of major societal movements that are going on right now, but kind of this thing, our bodies are really not important. But I think in Christianity, our bodies are important. We will be resurrected in bodies, not as some souls floating around in the ether. And I think that then has application for us as Christians in this world, where more and more the pull is away from being together with people in presence. I think there's a pull, although I think most people feel that pull and then want to go the opposite direction. I think most people, but there's a pull for some people that it maybe gets a little dangerous because they get sucked into a whole other, you can spend your whole life online, not dealing with people, not dealing with reality. And it can be actually pretty comfortable experience. But I think that's totally right. I think who we are meant to be people who are with other people as Christians specifically, but as humans in physical spaces. And that's just part of being human. All this other stuff is great.
Well, yeah, and it's
not just added.
It's not just even physical spaces, but it's also the mundane, how incredibly important that brings texture to the depth of a weighty conversation. So, gosh, I don't know how to fully express it, but it seems to me that like one could jump on a Zoom call and have an incredibly meaningful, important conversation. You and I do this podcast over Zoom, and most podcasts, it's incredibly meaningful. There's a few that maybe haven't been as meaningful, but we'll leave that up to the critics to decide. But I think what I'm getting at is it's kind of like just even that conversation of when you sit down with someone or you have someone over to your home, and maybe you are just talking about the weather or the difficulty that it was to make it to the cafe, or the interaction that they had with a store clerk on the way there, or whatever else it is, of the small talks that happens leading up to the really quote unquote important talk, how enriching that is to the texture of our life.
Exactly.
And a screen doesn't have texture. And so I wonder if organizations are going to be quote unquote more efficient, but they lose all the texture and depth of meaning. So like a workplace, and this is what a workplace, and I think ministry is very different than a workplace. So, but a workplace can get a lot of efficient meetings in via Zoom, but that's not why people end up staying at a place to work for the long haul. They stay because they end up having meaningful relationships with people. They enjoy the water cooler conversations, ping pong tables, whatever else it may be.
They accomplish something with a team together that does something. I mean, I think you're right, because I think if you think about you and I ability to get on and do a podcast, that is all predicated upon the fact that you and I have known each other for many years.
Yeah,
we've been in meetings together in different places in Europe.
Oh, the meetings we have seen.
The meetings we've seen. We've been on vacation together. We've walked the Camino. I mean, so there's that,
right? And
I think a lot of, I do think what you said is very interesting, because I think it's going to be really tricky for a lot of organizations, because you still have to have trust. That's the key to any team, any organization, is there has to be trust, and you have to build that trust through relationships. And maybe you can reverse engineer that through Zoom. Maybe you can, right? I don't know what
Spanish idiom were you bringing?
I don't know the backyard.
You can backyard it through the front door on the tail end.
I'm sorry. I know. I don't know why that word came out of the backyard. It's multiple languages.
Okay, so you can reverse engineer it. Yeah,
maybe you can reverse engineer it through Zoom. But at some point, you've got to get people in a room together. And I have a feeling that to some degree, all this stuff worked well and it looks efficient now, because all these people were, for the most part, working together. So they had history, but you can't keep everyone in this place and keep adding new people to it.
Yeah, right. You have no institutional memory and no culture.
Yeah, exactly. So I think in the efficiency. But I think there's already been some reports. What's his name? The guy who writes New York Times, kind of a Harvard guy. He did the Camino a few years ago. But he was talking about how, that he has some really great, interesting ideas. I cannot remember his name right now. David Brooks.
Oh, yeah. I didn't know he did the Camino.
Yeah, he did. He wrote quite a bit about it. I don't know if he put out a pretty big article about it, but he's a big Camino guy. But I think he was talking about, that, because he talks about happiness, and so I think his thing is that the research has already shown that being online, being in Zoom meetings is not provoking worker happiness. I mean, this is right. And did we really need a study for that? That's the question. Like, we all knew that internally, right. We knew that Zoom was not going to be something that, now Zoom can add into that. I can see my family more often, but I'm not going to go, Mom, the Zoom thing's working so good, we're never coming to visit again. Right. That's not going to happen.
You'll never see your grandkids again.
Never see your grandkids. You don't just see them online. It's great. So we knew that wasn't going to happen. We knew that deep down. So why do we think that in the work world or ministry world, that's going to be the de facto, when we know people aren't happy with that?
Yeah.
They're not content with that. So, and if you don't have happy people in a company, you're not going to have an efficient company. I mean, that's also.
I would say that you don't have a rich
business.
You don't have a rich and textured environment. So you have a very flat and shallow environment.
Yeah.
But okay, so there's two levels of this. One is the figuring out that society is going to have to do on an organizational and societal level of the role of these digital tools to bring effective but also enrich our lives. So that's a leveling out that's got to happen, and a figuring out that's got to happen. But and that's kind of, I guess I took us in that direction a little bit. But then there's the ministry aspect of this, which I think obviously you and I being in ministry is an important conversation to have. So let's take it from the Swedish and Spanish context, because those are where we are. Hey, pretty soon we're just going to have a one-sided conversation. We'll just have the regional Spanish conversation. The Galician. Which it's going to be interesting. We're going to have some interesting podcasts in the future of me trying to figure out what the heck is going on. I've got to be a real missionary again, put into practice all these things I've been talking about. But anyway, okay. So, so let's just use our context. The getting back out there in ministry. Obviously you guys have had, ministry wise, actually in Spain have had a really good year. I mean, as far as getting, new contact with people and, building relationships and all things considered, it's pretty good. I think that I just learned that in one of our cities, we had a person come to Christ this week, and which is hugely encouraging. Amazing, a new person that they had met during the pandemic. So just really, really encouraging stuff. But getting back out there, what is the role of in presence? How important is that? How much should we be using digital, and how much should we just be going scrap the digital, just go physical, or presence, let's say? I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? And what are y'all looking at for Spain?
Ooh. Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure we're totally, I think the idea we have is just that once we're sliding back into normal, and we weren't. So I think the question will be, what of the stuff that we innovated or came up with during the pandemic, what do we keep, and what do we get rid of? Because you can't do it all. And I think you have to prioritize being in front of people and being with people and being present with people. I think you have to prioritize that. Now, one thing that's happened is in Granada, we have a Bible study going on, and it's hard for some of the people in the Bible study to get to where the Bible study is. So right now it still makes sense maybe to do it online, but we're still seeing those people in their context in presence, So it's not like there's not a,
okay, so there's
just completely disembodied. So,
okay, so that's a really amazing point. So you have whether it be geography or timing issue with a Bible study that happens, and so an adaptive technological change that you've made to mix the two terms, but is to have it online via Zoom to accommodate for those things, but you're still meeting people outside that.
Yeah.
So that's a blended model. So in the conversation with Keller, what he was saying was he teaches preaching at a seminary in New York. And he was saying that actually the whole taking everything onto Zoom actually has allowed the students to get more out of him, because all of them, because of time and distance, because of the peculiarities of the New York traveling and everything and how big it is. A lot of times people couldn't make every class or every session with him, but because of Zoom, they have been able to make that. And so they're getting more out of him, but what they report is what they're most dissatisfied with is they're not getting interaction with each other. So these are future pastors or current pastors who aren't building relationships, which Keller says, that's the biggest loss here, because those are the relationships that are going to keep them going in ministry for the long term, is those peer relationships. So I think that what you're talking about in your context is something really important. It's the blending of the two, but probably the Zoom doesn't work very well for the long term if you're not having the physical space on some level.
That makes sense. Yeah. I think that's a good point. What about you guys? What are you guys seeing in Sweden? Are you guys kind of having to think through?
Yeah, I mean, so
challenges.
Every city has had its different challenges and different things. Thankfully, as things warm up, it's a lot easier to have bigger groups. So we're still limited to the number of people that we can technically, by law, have meet and everything. We've continued to be able to meet new people. There was I think though you just find that people long to be in presence of other people. Yeah. So even in Sweden, where a large group is 10 people, that's not totally true. I mean, you have groups of 5,500 all the time, but generally speaking, like if you're going to have a dinner party, 10's a pretty big dinner party.
Yeah.
And so, but you still find that people are very desirous of just being out and among other people. So even though Swedes on a that aspect. And what we're finding within our church, so the church where I serve as well, as an elder, there's just this bubbling up desire to have the literal texture of being together again.
Yeah.
We don't think everyone's going to come back, but some of those people hadn't been around for years anyway. But yeah, I think that there is that desire for presence ministry. So I think what we're talking about among ministry is, do things online, especially if you're going to do like a group Bible study. It's kind of like, that's something that actually works if you know each other and you can continue to have these conversations. We've tried some game nights, movie nights, some different things, and they actually work decently well. But what we find is they work best if you already have a context for which know the person. So we continue just to try to be in and among people as much as possible within the confines that we have currently, as we're kind of outlasting this thing. So I think, so in the beginning of this, here's what I would say. In the beginning of this, we drew back quite a bit and we did away with a lot of the things that just really weren't working for us. It gave us a lot of freedom to do that. And so that was a drawing back phase. Now, and what we said was, let's drill deep with the relationships we have. I think we've done a pretty good job of doing that. But now I think is a time to be ramping up for the pent up energy that people are going to have contact with people. So now I think is the time actually for us to be going out and trying to randomly meet people and invite them to new things, because people are going to be open again to exploring new things, not just meeting up with, because a lot. So here's the interesting thing. I wonder, I don't know if I have good quote unquote data on this, but I wonder if you've not been able to meet up with your old group of people for a long time, are you going to go back to that old group of people, or are you going to be more open for a new group of people?
Yeah.
You know,
that's a great question. I think that's, my question is what are the social relational, damage or lacks. I'm saying words that don't really make sense. But what has happened to people? That's maybe my question is, like, are people, as things go back to normal, and we have to, let's be honest, mainly in the Western world, right? In North Atlantic
India's
world.
But
I mean, most of the world has not really had lockdowns. I mean, that if you
True.
go to a lot, and because you can't, the way people live and the societies function, they have not been able to. They haven't had the privilege that, as wealthy countries, for us to go, oh, we're just not doing anything for 2 months,
Right,
so
right.
a lot of places have just continued to go. You get up, you harvest the crops, you take it to the market, you put your kid in school, and that's just life. Maybe you've got masks, but a lot of people in the world, life hasn't changed that much, but they've probably suffered a lot because we've all shut down. But in the Western world, what is the outcome? What is the fallout of people being kind of cut off, isolated? I think that's what I'm interested in. Can we as Christians step into that and be present and be a presence and be friends to people? I think that's the big question. Can we be friends to people who are discombobulated and looking. But that's the thing. I don't know if that's I don't know what the outcome is, what the fallout of all this is for people personally. But I would hope we would be there and be present for people.
Yeah. Yeah. I do think that this is a real opportunity so from my perspective, yeah, of course there was opportunity at the beginning of this thing, but I think that the Christians should never underestimate the power of presence. In someone's life. And so the more that we can be in a ministry context, be present in someone's life. And so like, I remember when I was in Central Asia, how much of my ministry revolved around just presence. So it was like, okay, I'm going to go have tea with this person for 8 hours. And during that time, we're going to walk around town. Or I'm going to their, hometown, their village, and I'm going to spend the weekend with them. And 3 of those hours we're sitting around as old neighbors come in just to see the American, and so you're all sitting around having tea or whatever. And I remember as a young person being frustrated with the idea of like, but I'm not getting quote unquote ministry done. And then there was this realization of like, oh no, this is the ministry. And the more that I could throw myself into that presence, that ministry of presence, the more that made a difference in these people's lives. I do think that there's something similar going on. We should be open to the ministry of presence in people's lives as we're reconnecting. And also be open to the fact that some people don't want to go back to the relationships that they had before because they were unhealthy. So maybe during this time, while, maybe they've been depressed, maybe they've been drinking too much, maybe to be honest, maybe they ended a relationship. And so I think there's just a lot of things there that if we could be open to presence, I think we'll
do you ever watch Top Chef?
No, I have not. I'm familiar with it, but
it's fascinating because for a number of reasons, but the one that just is currently being released on a weekly basis, not all one time. That interesting. They have to kind of think about that. But it's done in Portland, and it's kind of done. It was filmed during the pandemic, but post like the hard lockdown, right? Mm-hmm. And it's fascinating that a lot of the chefs, these are very intelligent, very hardworking, very creative people, top of their game. Several of them had said, yeah, the pandemic was really hard. I was drinking way too much. I gained a bunch of, a lot of people were talking about this. I had to close my restaurant. I had to lay up people off, and I kind of went, I think it's like 4 or 5 of them so far have kind of, as they're in their story, have talked about this, how difficult it was, and a lot of them having to saying, well, I started drinking a lot, and now I'm doing better. I'm out, and I'm hoping that Top Chef will be kind of another, and these are like I said, very competent, incredibly intelligent, creative, articulate people. So they've struggled, and the people who financially, that they're not necessarily, you can afford to open a restaurant. You're probably doing all right. And, end up doing all right in life. But they're like, this is a group of people that has really struggled with this last year. And so I think I also kind of got on my head a lot because I was like, oh, wow, I didn't, I think we've had a different experience. We've struggled a lot, but I haven't had to, lay people off, or haven't had to, close my dream. I've been able to keep doing more or less what I'm doing.
Right.
And start a podcast,
right.
And do a lot of other stuff that, and thanks to God, thanks to the people who churches and individuals who make
sacrifices.
For us. So, but I do think that there's a lot of people out there who have a lot of big questions and need help. They need something, and they're looking for more meaning because they've had to do some really hard things, or had to, deal with some really hard stuff. And it could be, some of it's relational, some of it's business, personal, but I think we need to be out there. I mean, and if you think about the Top Chef experience, is that these guys are doing, they're all coming together as a community of chefs, and they're getting this experience together, and they're able to kind of, even though they're competing, they're able to kind of lean on each other and share. So community too is going to be something that people need. They need to be able to go into a place and be, maybe it's a healing community, a community that we're, and I think that's gonna be different with students, because students necessarily don't have haven't maybe had to give up as much, but I think maybe older people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, this could have been a really, difficult time.
Yeah, but I think students haven't been able to fully develop the community. They've had a lack of community that a student would normally have, and I also
a lot
think
of uncertainty.
Yeah, a lot of uncertainty, and then you add into the fact that now you're going to have this gap of time in which community hasn't been modeled for these students. So now you've got students who ultimately, 2-ish years of, or a year and a half, 2 years of schooling, so like one example is here in Sweden, or here in Uppsala, we have this thing on the last day of April called Valborg, and it's all over Sweden, but it's biggest here in Uppsala because at some point, and I don't remember when it was, I'll get it wrong, but sometime I think it was in the 70s, a couple of students decided to make a raft out of styrofoam and float it down the river. And then the next year there were like 10 of them. And then the next year, and now there's hundreds and hundreds of entries, and it's these students make these rafts, and there's 150,000 people who come into our town to watch that. And there's all these celebrations and, drinking and sort of stuff. It was a huge day. Well, now you've had 2 Valborgs that have been completely canceled.
Yeah.
And it's it's not completely student run, but there is lots of traditions in and around the student world where now, if you're a first year or second year student, at your third and fourth and fifth years, you're leading those celebrations. Yeah. And these students who've been here for 2 years now have no idea what happened. My point is there's a communal memory that happens. And so some of that's going to be lost. Some of that's good, but some of it's also bad. I just think that there's an opportunity for churches and Christian organizations and people in ministry to step into that and provide. Humans need community, and we need context to process life. I think we as Christians offer something better and meaningful, more meaningful in the person of Jesus Christ. And so there's that opportunity, and hopefully we can step into it. Just a thought.
I think that's the thing, it's time for people to start thinking about getting out there and, connecting with friends. And I mean, it could be as simple as just inviting people over your house for dinner.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of, but something I'm not sure I'm hearing a lot of people talking about it necessarily. It's like, hey, let's unleash this group of Christians into the world to go out and invite their neighbors in and hang out with them and hear how they weathered this crazy last year.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know. I mean, I know here in Sweden we can't just yet, so we're still, our numbers are finally starting to come down a little bit in our what are we, a third or fourth wave? I don't remember which one. And so we haven't been able to fully do that. We started talking about it in our church leadership meeting last night. And so here's the question. So if you could, so there's an initiative of a different organization trying to get in August, churches and Christian organizations to go out and do evangelism in their cities during the month of August. So in 100 different cities around Sweden. Great initiative. And so the discussion ensued of, okay, do we want to do this? Do we not want to do this? And I don't have a problem with randoms. I'm not always convinced that randoms, especially in Europe, are the most effective or even necessarily evangelism, or maybe primarily evangelism. They serve their purpose. But it seemed to me it's like, we have a great opportunity. So here's what I want to get your opinion on. It seems to me coming out of this thing, people are going to want deep and meaningful relationships, like reaching out to a neighbor and having them over for dinner and having just a good, deep, meaningful conversation face to face that people are longing for seems maybe a better use of time than just randoms on the street. Although randoms on the street can produce things,
Yeah.
But I just think it seems
Yeah,
people are longing for a relationship.
Yeah, and what's going to be the best way to communicate God's love in that the situation, that context? I can see both arguments for both, but I feel like in place of putting out several thousand Swedes who go out all over Sweden talking to people randomly, which you would probably see some things, right? You would see a small percentage of people, and if you did things well and did more events and kind of as first step, so people could maybe and later get invited to something else or could experience community, and then but if you're just going to do random meeting of people and try to share the gospel with them, I'm not sure that's as effective as empowering a thousand of Swedes to invite their neighbors over for dinner or a barbecue or a hike or something, and just get to know them and listen to their stories. I feel like that could be much more powerful for me anyway, looking at the European context.
We still do randoms in Sweden, but we don't, it's not our best foot forward. I don't think. I think trying to build relationships and work through relational networks is our most effective thing. But I find that randoms tend to be, the way I put it is, they're the sprints that a pole vaulter does.
Yeah.
Sprinting has or the sprinting exercises or stretching exercises that a pole vaulter does have less to do with pole vaulting, but they have a lot to do with it at the same time. Like they're exercises that help you. And so sometimes randoms serve as an exercise for us, and it's more training for the person rather than putting the most hope in that God's going to use that. But now God uses that all the time, but I think some of the ways that which it gets used is different. From my perspective, there's a lot of good that comes from sharing a meal, especially I think in this pandemic, it's think of the things that people haven't been able to do that are human and go there, like do those things. Right. So like you've had conversations with random people with a mask on and it's not that pleasant, but you haven't had a good, meaningful meal with someone or, gone to a new community event, like you haven't joined a new group or, all those things. So offering or being involved in those things seems a good source of evangelism.
Yeah. I think to some degree too, Barrett, it's a question of, hold on.
The police are on to you, buddy.
Police are on to me now.
Keep going. We can hear you.
This is the bummer of living in the center of a city. It's a lot of noise, especially now that apparently criminals are back out in the street doing stuff. But I think one thing we have really got, in Cru we talk about how, evangelism is, sharing the gospel and power of the Holy Spirit and leaving the results up to God. And sometimes I wonder how much do we really believe that, because we really talk a lot about what you got to have this strategy. And I'm not saying we shouldn't have strategies, we shouldn't have good trainings. I'm not saying we shouldn't have those things, but we can over process everything, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Like I feel like sometimes it's like, if we can just talk to these amount of people about this thing, we'll see this amount. I'm like, and for me, I'm very skeptical of that now, because I feel like, no, let's just trust God. Let's just be present in people's lives. Let's tell people who we are. Let's talk about Jesus when we can, but let's pray for people, right? And let's just see what God does. And do we really believe, or do we have to always have this kind of, so I go back and forth on it, because I'm like, there's time to have plans and there's time to have really clear strategies that, but I'm not sure that's, you don't hear a lot of stories about the big plan, like who in their testimonies, like, I was walking, around by myself and someone came up to me and shared this thing with me and it changed my life. Okay, there's a few of those stories, but most of those, that's not what most people talk about. These friends that they had, who the way they lived their life, or they read a book. So I'm not saying there isn't the moment for all kinds of different things. But I just, I was like, where do we want to put all our time and effort in? That's I think that's where we came to in Spain, is like we would do randoms, and we still do every once in a while. We'll send people out, into the into the fray and see what happens. And we'll do thousands. You can do thousands and see no one. And so at some point we were like, this is not a good place to put our time, because and within the culture of Spain, people will talk to you. They love to talk. You can get all kinds of great conversations with strangers. They love it.
Yeah.
But these are people who already have all their friends, their family. So when you then make the next step, which is, hey, would you like to? No, I don't know you. Why would I want to talk to you beyond this moment? So what you have to do is if you want to really connect with people, you've got to connect with them, not in an artificial way, meeting them on the street, but you've got to invite them into something that they want to go to or be a part of.
What is connection for a Spaniard?
It takes a long time, I think, but I think, it's it depends on who they are and what they're looking for, but I think it's done in group. It's that's the other thing too. It would be really weird to have a one-on-one conversation with someone you just met about God, but in a group, if you had a group like 6 people and you came up 2 or 3 people and you had a conversation, that makes sense. That was fun, but it was just that moment. Yeah, I think that and that's all. Spanish culture is very in the moment too. So let's have fun in this moment. But when that moment's over, it's over. And those people were nice, but I have no interest in ever seeing them again, or they don't. So I think it's that building that trust over time, and that's real. When someone goes, this is someone I trust. This is someone I want in my life, and that's when you can really have more of and that takes time. That's. But trust is huge here.
Is there a culture where trust isn't huge?
Yeah, but I want to say in Spain, it's very. People say it. They'll say he's a trustworthy person.
So there's a big threshold to trust. Then
yes. So you just can't earn trust quickly. Like in America,
Yeah, we have low threshold to trust.
Yeah, low threshold to trust. So he seems like a good guy. I'll give him $1,000. Spain seems like a good guy.
His name is Bertie Madoff. Sounds like a winner to me.
yeah. Sounds like. So I think that's the thing too. Is like if you're in a culture where people are social and like to talk to you, you can misunderstand people talking to you as, we're making progress here. Whereas you got to understand the concept of confianza or trust, which is. That's a very tight group of people, that you don't just, not anyone comes into that group of trust. It's very high to get in that, but if you can get in there, then, there's a conversation that can happen and that takes time.
Yeah. So, it takes presence and it takes time.
Yeah. It takes a lot of presence. Yeah.
So I'm of the opinion, there's the book, I don't remember what book it was, but it was like quality time versus quantity of time. There's this idea of, he's a really quality time person, or they just need a lot of quantity time. I think I've decided there is no quality of time. There is only quantity of time.
Yeah.
That you just need to log time and meaningful ministry. So like, let's say you can go out on the street and you can see someone to come to Christ, but it's only quantity of time with that person in the context of community that's going to make that person into a lifelong disciple. Like
exactly. Yeah.
At the end of the day, you got to come back to somehow there's got to be quantity of time, and where that happens, that's up to the person, but quantity of time or just time in general is really important, which is that realization has made me, I think, a much more, how do you say, like a calm in my ministry, less frazzled or urgent. I mean, there's an urgency to the gospel with which we need to make it out there, but I think it's made me a lot more patient with the person who's in front of me, to build that relationship.
I think that's a great point.
The idea of just kind of these random, like, let's say just random encounters, evangelism, and things like that. We're not saying you're against it. What we're saying is at least within the cultures we're in, you need a lot more time and a context to build and process the gospel and the claims of Christ and life.
Yeah.
Is that a decent enough way to put it?
I think so. I think too, we need to be careful not to pigeonhole people. You know, I think I've always felt a little bit of guilt because I'm not particularly geared towards just meeting random people and explaining the gospel to them really well. Never the people I've usually seen trust Christ are friends or people I've known for a while or people in community that I've been able to, you know, kind of invite them into something. So I think that's, you know, we're Cru, particular organization, it was founded by a guy who was really good at that.
Yeah.
You know, but Bill Bright also was a guy who really loved Jesus and really exuded that in his personality and who he was. That's what I get the sense of. So him talking to somebody who sat next to him and playing was great, but that's not going to be everyone's style of evangelism. Not everyone. I mean, I don't think we don't see there's that's the only way that people come to Christ, probably the minimal way. But at the same time, some people are not going to be good at that. And so why are we making people feel guilty? And I'm not saying we are, but I think when you say that's the way to do it. And if you're not, you know, I have great friends who can walk into an ice cream parlor and in a really winsome way, get to know the person there and share the gospel with them but they're just natural at that. That's a personality thing. You know, I don't think you can train it because what ultimately people want is they want to know that whoever's talking to them cares about them and is listening. Right. So some people can do that and do that well with random strangers. I don't, you know.
Yeah.
I'm a shy person. I'm more of an introvert, but I do that well with people I have some type of context with. So I think too, that's the other thing. We have to be careful not to pigeonhole people into this is what you have to be able to do. Like, but we're just setting people back, I think. And it takes them maybe 5-10 years before they realize, oh, there's other ways to talk to people about Jesus. I'm not saying we're doing that as Cru, but I think that can happen, you know, because sometimes we can put too much of a priority on one type of evangelism. And I think, and then kind of go this other kind. That's off the, you know, that's not who we are. That's not really that effective. I'm like, and I think, you know, and so people get, you know, can feel guilt or like, oh, I'm just not really good at this. I don't like this. I'm like, it's all right if you don't like it. Like, who said you had to be good about standing in a you know, center of a plaza and yelling at people?
So that is the only way to do evangelism, and you know it.
That's right. So maybe some people are really good at that, you know, but
standing in a plaza and yelling at people. Okay. Maybe. So here's one way to look at it. So right, you're familiar with Strength Finders.
Yeah.
Or Strengths Finder. So it occurred to me that we're doing it as a leadership team here, and it's really good. Love the training, or love the kind of process of going through everyone else's giftings and different stuff. And you know, I am weighted in one side of things. I don't have too much in one category of talents or strengths. And as I was kind of thinking about it, it's kind of the getting done category. Executing is what it's called.
Yeah.
And but it's interesting with Strength Finders because it's kind of like, you know, there's also like relational gifts or whatever, and some people don't have those. And it's like, are those people bad at relationships? And the reality is no. What it means is you lean more heavily on other things to accomplish similar goals, if that makes sense. I don't have much in the executing side of things, but I can actually get a few things done in my life.
Me too.
I have my strategy, or the way that I go about accomplishing those things. I have to lean on other gifts. I think the gospel and the communication of the gospel or evangelism is similar to that. Some people, it's just the proclamation strength, and that's where you're going to go. So maybe that's the dude yelling in the middle of the town square. But then there's other people who have this intense ability to build relationships. What I would say is, I think evangelism and what we would do well, this might be the real gold nugget of this podcast right here. Hopefully, let's see what comes out of my mouth. Maybe
gold nugget alert.
So I think what we should be busy doing as ministers of the gospel who try to help other people share the gospel is helping them realize where they're gifted and strong and make Jesus known in that way.
Yeah.
Because that will end up being the most effective way. So it's like, if you're really good at making people feel at home and comfortable and connecting with people or empathy or whatever else, guess what? You be you and make Jesus known by being you. And that's, so you got to know the gospel. You got to know what it is. I mean, so the training and everything else, but it's not a one size fits all. Here's what we're going to go do. And now we're quote unquote doing evangelism.
Yeah.
Evangelism can and should be gifts of empathy and, those things that
it's a bigger.
Yeah. It's something bigger. And something more beautiful. So tying that back then to our conversation today, the three aspects of what we're talking about is presence, getting back out there and being present, and using you be you in that presence.
Yeah, you be you, you be you, you be 40, you be you. Well, I'll just, my former pastor. Well, there's another busy day, busy Friday.
That is truly a European,
yeah,
sound. That siren.
My former pastor, he's now I don't know if he's retired. Ron Skates, great preacher, was head pastor Highland Park Pres for a long time. I think now he's like associate or did something at First Pres San Antonio. Just a great pastor. He would always tell the story about he became a Christian because of this one guy, who every day in church would smile at him when he was a kid, when he was a teenager. He always was friendly and said hello and smiled, and he just saw something in that person that said, I want that. I want to, because probably there were some other people in church. It's a Presbyterian church. They weren't so friendly, but he saw something in somebody who was just living out their life in a way very simply. Yeah. And so I think that's the thing too, when you get back to just trusting God, that in some sense God is working. We need to be praying. We need to be available. We need to be present. We need to be doing all the things you said, but also we just need to trust God and walk with him, and God will use us, I think, in people's lives, and it'll.
So here is a question I've been thinking about lately. What role does fun play in ministry and the communication of the gospel? Mm-hmm. I think I've been thinking a lot about my time in Sweden and how many times there might not have been joy as deep or maybe at all in what I was doing. Mm-hmm. And if I think back to times where I've been an effective minister of the gospel, there is joy. And I'm not saying like joy in like my salvation. I'm actually kind of talking about like, no, just fun, like just an enjoyment of life and others, and a lack of stress. I wonder how much, if we can dig down deep into that as a community and ministers of the gospel, how effective that becomes.
When you said that, it reminded me of our conversation with Callum Lindsay about Alpha.
Yeah.
And he just when he said something about, he was around these people who just were fun to be with. Yeah. They were kind, they weren't concerned about certain things. They just were good, fun people. He's like, well, this is interesting. And I think even just talking to Callum, he just seemed like, here's a guy who clearly loves God and loves hanging out with people and just brings joy to stuff, Yeah. And I think a lot of times we've lost that sometimes or we've tried to manufacture it. I think like we've tried to yeah like we try to make it like, well, we're having fun, we're not really having fun, and I think it goes back to Grace. What's that movie which I've never seen? It's called Babette's Feast. It's a
I've never seen it
Grace. Yeah, but everyone talks about it. I think Greg Kreider would like talk about it all the time in his classes. Yeah, but it's all about someone who's joyful and has grace. Grace because it understands forgiveness, understands mercy, but that should give us joy. It should give us, it can make us a people who celebrate and love and enjoy life. And sometimes we're not that way. And I don't want to,
Yeah, and sometimes, of course, sometimes I want to be clear in saying sometimes we don't need to be flippant. So there's a difference between flippancy of like what you're saying, manufactured like energy, versus just joy or enjoying things. And part of it, I guess, an authentic and relaxed and, let's say, one could say Christ-centered, but I think that makes people think the wrong thing, because then they go, what's biblical, and that's not what I mean. I mean more like Christ-centered is more like you're experiencing the Prince of Peace in your life. So it's not a Eastern mystic home, but more like everything's going to be okay, like the way that people would describe, what's his name, Dallas Willard. He had this sense about him that when you were around him, you just knew everything was going to be okay. I think that's what I mean. So it doesn't have to mean we're just always like silly and laughing, but more
it's gravitas. It's gravitas, but it's
that's it.
Yeah, it's not goofiness,
right? Because you can actually be full of joy and grace even when lamenting. Like there's an authenticity, but I don't like the word authenticity for this context because I think it. Yeah. I don't know, like, but we need to be
authenticity has become the most inauthentic word that we have.
Yeah. So I heard someone say the other day, when a pastor tells you, let me be authentic, it's the least authentic thing he could possibly do because he had to manufacture that. It's like, that's probably true. I don't know. It's something I've been thinking about lately. It's not fully completely developed and put into words yet for me, but I think that there's something there. And maybe this is just the next phase of where I'm at in ministry of going, I think I missed something for the last maybe 10 years or so, because of maybe just, I don't know if it's been 10 years, for the last bit of me just, and during this pandemic and transition that we've been going through, I'm beginning to find again of going, maybe sometimes you just need to go and have fun with someone. And at the end of it go, isn't it nice that we have a God that God exists and he created us to enjoy life.
Yeah.
And that's your evangelistic pitch for the day,
Yeah.
It's a great thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, Garrick, do you have any Texas music wisdom for me? I see you are wearing an old 97s.
The old 97s. I'm excited that live music's coming back, right? That's going to be happening soon. You can see bands again.
Did you see the follow-up for that concert in Barcelona, 5,000 people that they did as an experiment, that it was not a super spreader event?
No, not a super spreader at all. Yeah.
So that shows you can still do things like we can figure this out.
We can figure this out. Yeah. It's going to be all right. We can get back to Texas music, man. That's a deep.
Are y'all going back this summer?
Yeah, we'll be back in July 6th from early September.
Do you have any concerts lined up that you're hoping to go
I need to start looking, because I know, the thing is, it's, no one's touring necessarily, because you can play some places, but you can't play others. So I'm not sure it's worth the although Texas is often, as you know, big enough to support its own internal touring.
Yeah.
So, the one guy I really like is a guy named Paul Cawthon, and he is touring. He's got some. Give
me. I've never heard of him. What is his genre?
He's kind of classic. He kind of sounds like he's got a very deep voice, very classic, kind of Texas country music. Kind of you would almost think of like Waylon Jennings.
Okay.
But he's a young guy out of Dallas, or out of Tyler, actually. So a younger guy. So he's kind of got also a little bit of an edge, more modern.
What is it that, the idea that certain places or that styles of music would be unique to certain places is not unique to Texas. But what is it about Texas that makes the music so different?
Yeah, I think because it has an edge to it. Like Texas has an edge to it, right? We are Texas. And so I think Texas music has a certain how would I say, je ne sais quoi? No, a certain I don't even know what that means.
I don't
A
even
certain
know. It sounded French though.
attitude. It's a lot more of an attitude. You know, it's not prideful music, but it's got an attitude. This is from Texas. You know, like every Texas singer songwriter even has songs about Texas, right?
Yeah.
That's, you know, how other states got some, but there's a whole genre, you know, of songs about Texas.
Yeah,
by Texans.
I mean,
it's
Pat Green. I sing songs about Texas.
Yeah, and Pat Green's got like 30 songs about
Yeah,
it. You know,
it's
Lyle
like-
Lovett, you know,
Yeah,
Lyle
yeah.
Lovett, Robert L. Keane, Willie Nelson. So I think and there's a communal aspect to it of the culture of Texas that ties in there. Like you hear a Texas song, and you and I probably pick up on references
Yeah,
and ideas and concepts that other people outside of Texas wouldn't naturally get, you know, because
Yeah.
I know those guys, or I know, so it's very regional in that sense, but it also bleeds into.
well, it's
like,
funny because there's even regional references within Texas music. So sometimes it's West Texas references, which you
Yeah.
probably understand better than I do.
Yeah.
But like Pat Green's got a song where he mentions stopping off to get an Allsup's fried burrito.
Yeah,
you know,
course.
and it's like
Yeah.
Allsup is a
Yeah.
gas station chain in
Yeah.
West Texas, Northwest Texas, or is it also in deep, like mostly West Texas?
I think it's mainly what I'm trying to think if I've seen it outside of West.
It's like Amarillo, Lubbock, kind of up near that
Yeah,
area. But do
Midland.
they have them in Midland?
I think, yeah.
Anyway, but just stuff like that. But you don't, and it, yeah, you know, there is an edge, and partly what it is there is not an apology. There, people are not apologetic about being Texan or thinking about Texas or
Yeah.
writing about
Yeah.
Texas. Like it's just like,
Yeah.
heck no, this is who I am. Take it
Yeah.
or leave it.
I think also there's a real focus, and this may come from, you know, so I'm gonna get historical here and see if this works. But you know, the Cowboys, the you know, the original cow that drives,
Not the
cattle
football
drives.
team, but the
Not the football team,
yeah.
but you know, that country music kind of developed out of them, where they're out in these cattle drives, you know, weeks at a time, and they would sing or tell stories
Mhm.
about things or things they'd heard. So that was, and I think it was a more, you know, much more oral culture, even in the early 1900s, of getting around telling stories. And I think that somehow seeped into Texas, because if you think about a lot of our singer-songwriters, the story is very important. Like The Road Goes On Forever by Robert L. Keane. I mean, what an
Yeah.
incredibly developed story, which has,
Yeah.
in a song, you have the whole shebang, you know, climax,
Yeah.
denouement,
Yeah.
you've got the whole thing. And so there's a real sense of writing a story or telling a story about characters that are kind of out of this world. So there's a lot about Texas music, and it, you know, it goes back, but then also kind of comes up, you know, we got guys like Willie Nelson and Waylon Jennings, who are kind of the maybe revivalists of maybe that
Kind of the
genre.
outlaw country
Yeah.
sort of
Yeah.
genre. Yeah. You know, I got to a point where because I grew up in country music and liking country music and stuff, but then I stopped really listening to country, and I only listened to Texas country, which
Yeah.
is a unique brand of country music. I don't listen a ton anymore, but every time I go back to Texas. So here's the way I would describe it. In order to fully appreciate Texas music, and I would include, you know, there's a whole genre of kind of, there's honky tonk, but then there's also kind of the Texas blues house
Yeah.
kind of, you know, so
Yeah.
it's a really wide actually.
It's a wide, yeah, it's a
span
really
of-
almost folk, just
Yeah,
pure
yeah,
folk music, you know, which is just
but so you get all that, but in order to really understand any of that, you actually have to probably have experienced a Texas summer. Like in some sense, like you actually have to have sweat you know,
Yeah.
yourself through your shirt in a
Yeah.
matter in the distance it took you to walk to your car
yeah.
in order to fully understand anything. It doesn't mean that all the songs are talking about Texas summer. It just means it's the what is it called? The Terra Noir, not Terra Noir, that's Black Earth. I don't know what it is, but anyway, you have to understand the feel, and the better way of saying it maybe is the texture of a place. That's, boy, I'm saying that phrase a lot today.
Yeah.
But it is that, and that's what I
Yeah.
love about it, is you actually have to fully appreciate like Pat Green's song, you know, southbound on 35, you actually have to have driven that thing, like
what a great line too. What the hell am I doing in Kansas City?
That's right. Says everyone who's ever been there.
Why am I not in Texas? Sorry. Kansas City's a great place. Well, and as you said, all these songs are popping in my head of songs about it's not raining, it's hot. Like there's, the soles of my boots were melted off. I can think of all these lines melted off because of the heat. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. There's so much stuff that it's really rooted in all, even you want to go, I mean, and there's so much because Texas music. Okay. So you got Texas country music, but then there's a whole other genre, which is stuff like, that's Texas rock. But it's still
Texas
very
rock,
tied,
but it's not rock.
Still very
it's
tied.
Texas rock.
Yeah.
It's
Texas, and it's still very tied thematically and community-wise to that country and that blues. It's very it's probably hard if you're not from Texas or haven't spent. It's probably hard to understand what we're necessarily talking about. Well, and
I haven't lived in Texas for 20 years now, so
yeah.
I know that Texas has gone through a lot of changes, but you think of, you have three major cities, but then you throw San Antonio in there as well. And all the flavors, because Houston and Dallas are very different cities, right? And they produce people who write and think differently. And then Austin has its own culture. And so you got all these cultures that are going on. And so anyway, Texas music.
Well, I'll give you a reference.
Some Texas music tonight.
I'll give you a reference. So Kev Russell is a guy known as Shiny Ribs. So you ever heard of the band called the Gourds? Yeah. The Gourds were an Austin, Texas kind of bluegrass, a very, very Texas band. Then they broke up. Kev Russell started a band called Shiny Ribs. It's kind of his nickname. And it is swamp rock. He did a bunch of research. I read an interview about kind of music that's from around Galveston, Houston, and the Bayou. And maybe more African American, but more funk inspired, funk and blues. And so he put together a band that called Shiny Ribs that does a lot of kind of funk, blues, but still mixing in with country music. And so Shiny Ribs is a great band, especially like horns and more of a beat. But they're an Austin-based band But there's just a lot to draw on.
So we need to delve more into Texas music again. Maybe we'll do a Texas music episode that we've been talking about doing for a long time. But I'll close with this. Learn another language, earn another soul. There is a reality that a people's language is tied up in its culture and who it is. You can't just go to Texas and know English and think that you know Texas or any place, to be honest. Like we know Texas, but it is an interesting mix and culture. But there is a reality there that the music and the poetry of a people is reflected we're so much deeper. So this goes into everything that we've been talking about today. We're so much deeper than a picture on a screen or a connection that happens. We need the personal interaction. We're so much deeper than the message that is contained in the Bible. It's deeper than that. It is, like this is it. There's texture and there's life to everything. And so ministry itself is so wrapped up in happens in all of that. And if you break it down into a number of steps or a bite-sized chunk, you're probably missing the ultimate point of all of that.
Yeah.
Like we could talk about Texas music all day and the bits and the pieces, but until you begin to really get into that, you can't fully appreciate it for what it is.
Amen.
If that makes sense. All right.
I think we should be done. Great summation.
That was
a great summation.
Hey, that's what I'm here for. That's why you pay me so much.
That's the big podcast dollars.
Amy and Teresa. All right, my friend. I hope you have a great weekend. It was great to see you, and
it's very good to see you, man.
We'll see you at the next time.
Sounds good.
All right, buddy.